Honestly, I don't know what's worse, talking about Donald Trump or not talking about Donald Trump. Seems like after an entire year, we could shut the f*** up about him, but also, there was a time where we all kind of hoped he'd, go to jail. Remember that? For all the crimes. Remember the crimes? So as much as we don't want to start the new year by reminding everyone of the bad president from more than a year ago, we should really be wondering what's going on with all of that crime stuff. And of course, it should be noted that Trump has so many lawsuits that you can find interactive web pages guiding you through all of them. A lot of it is your typical Trump crimes, like promoting a pyramid scheme and treating employees like garbage. So we might as well skip that and start with the sexual assault allegation. You know how our former president sure seemed to have done a lot of sexual assault stuff? Well, amazingly, only one of those incidents has resulted in a court case, specifically from E. Jean Carroll, who in 2019 accused Trump of assaulting her back in the 90s. When he was first confronted by this accusation, then President Trump put out an official big boy super smart statement saying, and I'm quoting, "I've never met this person in my life," which is pretty funny considering the article that first broke the news had posted a photograph of Trump and Jean Carroll together, having, met. Very smart stuff. Really good at crimes. Glad we made him president that one time. Trump went on to deny the incident took place and call his accuser all kinds of names, prompting Carroll to file a lawsuit for defamation. This is the lawsuit that is continuing to this day, one where Trump is being asked to submit a DNA sample. The reasoning being that in order to prove defamation, Carroll will simply have to prove that Trump was lying in his denial. And so her lawyers want to match DNA on her dress from the assault to Trump, which will at least prove that they have met and interacted. It's interesting, bipartisan pattern of presidents and DNA and dresses. Anyway, I wanted to lay this out because, as you might have figured, none of this would result in Trump actually facing penalties for sexual assault, the thing he's done. The case is technically about defamation, and to continue our extremely depressing pattern of powerful creeps using the law in their favor, it's possible that Trump won't even be affected by that charge either.
The Justice Department filing documents to represent President Trump in a defamation lawsuit. Last year, advice columnist E. Jean Carroll accused the president of raping her at a New York City hotel back in the mid-90s. Carroll filed the defamation suit in November after Trump denied her allegation.
What? So the DOJ, or more specifically the DOJ under current President Joe Squintface Biden, is making an effort to defend former President Donald Trump in his defamation suit concerning the rape he did. The argument here being that since Trump made the statements officially as the president, he was actually representing the government when he lied about having not met E. Jean Carroll. Therefore, her case should be against the government and not the individual of Donald Trump. And what makes that all even more fucked up, if the DOJ is allowed to do this, then it will prevent Carroll's lawyers from obtaining a DNA sample. In fact, it'll completely end her defamation case altogether. Because, and this is real life, it turns out that you can't sue the government for defamation. No. Really. It's why Trump was able to use his presidency to harass and lie about the press all of the fucking time. It turns out that back in 1946, when Congress created a law dealing with consequences for people injured by our government, they completely skipped over acts of slander or libel because they deemed it too complicated to lump into claims of physical harm. At the time, they assumed a second law would then be made specifically for defamation, which didn't happen, but still could, huh? Let me check how Congress is doing. Okay, so they're probably not gonna ever do that. So yeah, everyone just forgot about it, creating this loophole that will now most likely shield our terrible former president from ever even a sliver of consequence for opening his idiot mouth whenever he liked. And this is where we really hit the main theme of this episode, folks. Huzzah, a theme! Specifically, the pattern of extremely bad people who have obviously done crimes, somehow being immune to consequence, in part because of the methods people are using to try and nail them. Because for some frustrating reason, they somehow walk this line between being overt about their crimes, but not leaving enough evidence to actually be put in jail. Meanwhile, they manage to continue having a baffling level of popularity with the most denial-prone members of our society. After all, in case you forgot, Donald Trump's successful election started with this.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab him by the pussy.
And so ever since, there's been this continuous lust for seeing this creep-ass motherfucker in jail. He represents, for a lot of people, the ultimate privileged white powerful man seemingly immune to actual justice. And every time it seems like we might have him, he slips away. And I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but that will probably also be the case when it comes to the January 6th insurrection. Because let me tell you, they just do not have much on him so far. And the attempts to nab him all seem to be reliant on obscure or low-level laws that could easily be fought against. In DC specifically, they're looking to charge Trump with inciting people to commit violence, a misdemeanor punishable by just 6 months in jail maximum. Meanwhile, the NAACP are suing him for violating the Civil Rights Act of 1871, a largely unused law that was created to prevent the KKK from intimidating members of Congress. But these are all supplemental efforts, garnishes to the treason salad we so desperately want to force-feed our former president. Presumably, the first salad he will have ever eaten in his life. Sorry, second salad. So what of the main event, though? As in, the January 6th committee currently looking at whether or not they will recommend that the DOJ pursue criminal cases against Donald Trump. This is basically the promise ring of criminal investigations, as we are essentially 10 steps behind any actual pursuit of justice for the obvious coup attempt made by our dick former president. Except the word coup or treason or dick are never going to actually touch Trump, because the specific charges they're looking into is simply obstruction. Obstruction, along with witness tampering, are the current charges that have been used against the individual insurrectionists who have been stuck in jail for the January 6th riots. The obstruction charge comes with a maximum punishment of 20 years in prison, which seems unlikely considering the lenient punishments we've seen so far. And even that seems excessive for the low-level saps who are ostensibly in a cult of this guy, who's just hanging out places now. Because while there are so many smoking guns, even documents and PowerPoints outlining the White House's plans to call the legitimacy of the election into question, they're not linked directly to Trump. Although we now definitively know, with evidence, that Fox News functions explicitly as a propaganda tool for the right and had been communicating directly with Trump. But I guess that's such a given that it's not even shocking to hear. It's just weird that we've all sort of accepted that there's an entire news channel that openly does this. Anyway, in the case of the PowerPoint, it is entirely framed as if they actually believe the election isn't legitimate. What I mean is that they never explicitly say, this is how we're going to do a coup, nor is there any evidence that it was shown to Trump or that Trump acted on it. It is not a smoking gun. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how many times the news frames it like it is one.
Glenn, with evidence like that, it's a PowerPoint presentation to do a coup.
And so what I'm getting at is that while we're seeing very swift acts of justice for all the low-level rioters, that's because those people straight up did the fiscal crimes while on camera. They were very, very high profile about their crimes as they were doing them. Very often, their crimes included stuff like assaulting a police officer. For Trump and others, this will prove very frustrating. It's once again that theme of our episode again, where our justice system is throwing all the low-level people in jail as a sort of good enough version of justice. Much like how we're going to settle for Ghislaine Maxwell, who is a monster and helped facilitate monstrous things, but we're not going to get any of the powerful clients. We won't get Trump, but at least a bunch of his base might go to jail after he misled them into ruining their lives. Prison reform now! No, wait, not for them. For the people I like. But to top it all off, the method for justice might prove to be its own undoing. As some experts have pointed out, using the obstruction charge against the rioters might actually end up being too vague to stick. And so once more, the need for quick justice might ultimately bite justice itself on the ass. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.